order. Want to thank everyone for being here. Miss Susan has some little cards. If you'd like to speak on any agenda item, if you get a card from her, she'll get them to me and we'll see as we get to that agenda item. In the absence of a flag, we've got a pretty facsimile of a flag to our left, and I would ask Commissioner Reynolds to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Susan. Here.
Allison Sari,
Here.
Andrew Blanchard.
Yeah.
Brandon Duffler,
Present.
Bill Hogan,
Here.
Gene Reynolds.
Here.
Kevin Segura.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, there's 7 commissioners present. Secretary Marcy is also present.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion for the adoption of the July 7th commission meeting minutes?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded. Do I hear any objection? Hearing none, the minutes are adopted. Do I hear a motion to approve the August 4th agenda? All right. Here, having a motion and a second, is there any objection to the adoption? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Commission special announcements, personal privilege. Anyone have anything? Mr. Secretary? Okay, thank you all. Major Skinner, enforcement report, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The month of July, we had 17 boating incidents, 13 injuries and 3 fatalities, 770 written citations, 608 written warnings, and 36 public assists. And as usual, I have a brief synopsis of some cases that were made last month. 3 men were cited in Plaquemine Parish for unlawfully taking oysters off of a private lease and failing to have written permission. Agents were responding to theft complaints from local leaseholders near Buras when they observed 3 men in a vessel harvesting oysters by hand. Agents found them harvesting oysters from another person's private lease and without written permission from the leaseholder. The captain also failed to record proper harvest information in his DHH logbook. Agents seized 25 sacks of oysters and returned them to the private lease water bottoms. We placed that vessel on seizure order pending adjudication of the case. In support of Operation Dry Water, the Enforcement Division arrested 12 boaters statewide for driving a vessel while intoxicated from July 2nd to July 4th. Operation Dry Water is a joint program involving Wildlife and Fisheries, the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators, and the United States Coast Guard. Anyone cited for a DWI on the water or on the road will lose his or her driving license and boating privileges for the specified time ordered by the judge in the case. Also, each offense of operating a vessel or vehicle while intoxicated counts towards the total number of DWI crimes, whether they happen on the water or on the road. Enforcement agents collaborated with the Venice Marina and the nonprofit Hunters for the Hungry to donate seized fish to the New Orleans mission in conjunction with the Second Harvest Food Bank. Agents in the New Orleans region bring seized fish in connection to fishing violations to the Venice Marina. At the marina, the fish are processed and held for Hunters for the Hungry. A total of 800 pounds of fish were recently donated to the New Orleans mission, with over 400 pounds of that fish from LDWF seizures. The rest of the fish came from fishermen donations around the Venice area. Hunters for the Hungry's mission is to encourage hunters and fishermen to make a difference in the lives of their neighbors by sharing their bounty of wild game and fish in order to combat hunger. This concludes the enforcement report, sir.
Thank you, Major. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Okay, next we have the presentation of the LDWF budget by Mr. McClinton.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, we had a sort of a discussion on the sort of the way that Wildlife Fisheries does the budget. The hope today, this is sort of an update on where we are fiscally, where we're at, and then kind of go into our budget as it stands after this most recent legislative session. And so that's what I'm hoping to show the next couple slides. This first slide is the revenue that goes into our conservation fund. The conservation fund is sort of the general fund of the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. That top line is total revenue. The blue line is oil and gas minerals. The green line is recreational hunting and fishing licenses. The purple is boat registration and titling, and then the red line is commercial. The blue line that kind of right there on the bottom is civil fines or civil penalties and civil restitution, those things. So kind of the point is you see the uptick recently, and most of that had to do with the price of natural gas. Most of the oil and gas that occurs on our WMAs is natural gas production. And when it was trading at $5 to $7, it tends to increase sort of our revenue. So we've seen this sort of uptick recently. There's a slight uptick because of the increased recreational hunting and fishing licenses. There's the slight downtick that you see in the boat registration is because we pulled the money out of the conservation fund for boat registration. Now 100% of the boat registration money is going to go to the aquatic plant control fund. So that's why you see that sort of downtick. And then there's a slight uptick from in the commercial license because of the increase that occurred from November 15th when those prices went up. So you see sort of an uptick there. So that box is to kind of show you that. So what does all that mean? Well, before I get to that, I just wanted to show sort of one of the concerns that we had as a department is this is an idea of how many people buy annual hunting and fishing licenses, since that's sort of the largest user revenue source for the department. On the left is fishing and on the right is basic hunting. So the top line is the number of users. The second line, the darker color, is the people who actually buy annual ones. And the reason you see that number going down, even though the number of users, individuals go up, is because lifetime, which represented by the triangle line, once you have that line's cumulative, because once you have a lifetime license, you can do this forever. So that's not annual lifetime licenses, it's cumulative over time. The other one that's not is with the senior license. So more and more people are qualifying for that senior license, which is a $5 license, and it will be for the next 5 years and goes up to 20. But so as more and more people qualified for that senior hunt fish combo, that's represented by the line in the dark. So that's something that we're still trying to deal with. I just wanted to bring that up, that the department, even though we did get the license restructure, we do need to focus on the recruitment and retention and reactivation of individuals to deal with those people who are buying those annual licenses. So back to where we are now, this is the top line in orange is the balance from the previous year. So that like 105 moves up to the top. We have revenue, we subtract expenditures, and we have this other number, which depends on the year. Sometimes it's expenditures for a capital outlay. Sometimes it's accounting mishaps between DNR and wildlife and fisheries. But basically, we're at the point now that through 2024, we're solid. We should still have money. In fact, in 2025, I think right now we're projecting a little over $4 million deficit. But with some of the changes that we have to the civil fines programs and civil restitution and the sort of introduction of carbon sequestration and those, I think we're going to make it through 2025 fine. I think we have 4 years to get there, and that $4 million deficit shouldn't be too big of a hill to climb. So I'm thinking at this moment in time, I feel comfortable saying that the department's funded through 2026. And that's a lot of that has to do with the price of natural gas, but it also has to do with y'all supporting us on the license restructure. And so, because those figures are, put into these projections. So wanted to share that with everybody. And I was hoping this would actually work out a little bit better than this, but one of the things about the department is we're not just conservation fund, we're 32 different statutory dedications.
Brian, let me interrupt you.
Yes,
if I could, please. When we went to the legislature and we asked for the fee increase,
Yes, sir.
did we give them the projections that we would be back in the hole in less than 5 years?
Yes, sir. When we did the fee increase, we were still, when the bill passed, that was before the uptick in natural gas on our WMAs, and we were getting around $800,000 a month. Since after last session, I'd say August or September, we started getting over 1 million, and in the most past 6 months, we've been getting almost 2 million. That's sort of the increase that you've seen. So at the time when we sat there, we were on a multiple years going through with our revenue going down, and we had basically, it's easier to show it. So,
I don't want to
yeah.
get you away from your presentation,
No,
but
that's
they
fine.
understood that that this wasn't a long-term fix,
Yes, sir.
that it was a short-term fix.
Yes, sir. And without the sort of the increased oil and gas, it's the increase that we're anticipating once the full restructure is implemented is not enough to fill the whole gap, but it was going to get us more than halfway there. So with the uptick in oil and gas, and if we do end up getting some of that carbon sequestration revenue, that hopefully will hold us up to go longer into the future. And so with this most recent session, we started off this, it's very small here, but $214 million is what's going to the department, which is actually the largest budget we've had since I've been here, but a lot of that's federal money. We got $20 million in federal dollars and $5 million in some dedications to try to do some debris removal of vessels after Hurricane Ida. We're working with LOSCO and DEQ and GOSIP on trying to help that, help out the region, those areas. So there's a lot of this money is contingent upon grant and projects, but that's sort of where we ended up. I have a breakdown of those amendments. These are still in your packet on what amendments occurred and what those intentions were within the Office of the Secretary, the Office of Wildlife, and the Office of Fisheries. This budget is total department. It's not broken out by offices, but it is further back in your presentation. You'll have each, if you want to know about individual offices. So those revenues add up to $214 million. This is how it's broken down. Basically $50 million of salaries and 35 related benefits, and then the rest is broken down. That's obviously personnel services is our highest expenditure. It takes people to manage 1.5 million acres and manage the fisheries and wildlife and enforce the laws of the state. So the next bill we have is our capital outlay. So from House Bill 2, we ended up getting $2.2 million for our phase 3 of the Enforcement Academy at Waddell. I believe this is going to be a cafeteria and some administrative offices building. We got some money put into wildlife land acquisition, and then we got $950,000 in cash to potentially purchase a Hammond headquarters. Right now we're renting. It's about a $70,000 annual lease in Hammond that we're currently leasing. And so one of the ideas is to find a more permanent place for those wildlife staff and move the enforcement region that currently sits in Baton Rouge to that area as well. Here's a listing of our existing capital outlay projects. And so the hope of this presentation is to sort of say, here's where we were, here's what we got. And then I'm planning on coming back here in November or December and say, this is what we asked for, and then kind of do this thing again and keep this thing going to where the commission knows what we're asking for, what projects that's going on, and what we're working towards. So the listing of the other capital outlay projects, they're in your packet. And if you have any individual questions, I'll be happy to answer what I can and then seek assistance from the table to your right of any questions that I cannot answer.
Y'all kind of let me know if y'all have any questions as we go along. Go back to the Pineville facility. What happened? Did the bids come in over budget there?
The bids came in slightly over budget. We were able to get with FP&C to change their contingencies. And I think they worked with the contractor to get it within, that bid has been awarded. So they should start beginning construction on the Pineville office.
Members, a lot of the capital outlay, we've gotten a lot of capital outlay this past year and the year before. We've been very fortunate to have a governor that has supported everything that we brought over there. But a lot of those capital outlay projects, we were able to get it funded through the representatives and senators in those areas who supported our projects and came forth and said, look, if y'all want to redo that office over there, it needs to be redone. We're going to seek about getting the funding to do that. Pineville was one, Lake Charles was the other one. Hammond was also one. So the legislators have been really essential in getting that money for us to be able to do those things in those particular areas. Of course, it makes them look good in their areas too. So it's a double, I say a double win for us. to be able to get that done. But we've been very fortunate to get a lot of capital outlay. Of course, the other thing is we've had some surpluses that have given us the ability to go and get some money. In fact, every time I go to the governor's office, he said, okay, what do you want now? You know, you don't have enough. I said, no, we never have enough. You know, we've suffered for years and years and years. We're playing catch up now, and we're trying to get all of our offices back up to where they need to be. We've got another project that we're going to look at in Monroe. Is it Monroe? In Monroe. That office is pretty old and it needs some work over there. So we're going to look at, number one, can we remodel the whole thing, what that cost is going to be, or is it cheaper to build a whole new facility? So that's my next project I'm going to be tackling.
So
Let me chime in with the secretary. One of the reasons that I asked for this presentation, and I've talked to you about a little bit about it, I've talked to Brian a little bit about it, but since I've been on this commission, this is the first time that I remember that we've gotten a presentation like this.
yes,
And I'm asking that this become part of our annual presentation prior to the legislative session, to where we can get involved. And one thing that I recognize, and you know, you're a personal friend of mine, the governor's a personal friend, and but unfortunately, they're not gonna let y'all stay in your positions. You probably will be. I mean, you're doing such an excellent job, you'll probably carry over, but the governor is term limited. But this commission provides an opportunity for continuity and looking at these projects where you don't throw everything out every 4 or 8 years and start all over again because of some new ideas and all, you know, and you know, there's internal politics that comes into all this too. You know, I'm looking at Hammond, you know, that's some expensive real estate down there. I remember when we were trying to replace the psychiatric hospital, and I learned all about land values in the Hammond area and all. So one of the things that I hope is that the commission can receive an annual project, and next month we're gonna have a White Lake presentation. Well, I see a lot of projects that are not on this capital outlay deal for that are needed at White Lake. And we're talking about levees and stuff that one more storm and we may dramatically impact the ability of that area to ever be restored, you know, or at much greater cost to be restored. And so there needs to be some thought is where are our priorities, you know, over nice office buildings that are show places, but when you get out in the field, well, we're not doing our stewardship of maintaining some of these habitats and areas and all. And so I'd like to see the commission at least we're not going to have a yes or no vote, I don't think, unless I can convince Cole of our statutory and constitutional authority, but at least we could help provide some continuity between the administrations and look and ask questions about where our priorities are and where these projects are and money are going for them. And I'm like you, you know, with our past service, you know, I understand the process pretty well.
Yes.
Never completely caught on to it, but I kind of got a little inkling before I left.
We're gonna, no, I think it's a good idea, okay, to do this so that the commission knows where we're headed. And certainly the commission can help me get to that point when I'm gonna need that help or that push to get over the hill. We're looking at White Lake. In fact, I'm going to visit White Lake this coming week to look at what our needs are there and see what kind of funding and where we can get some funding to get that done. I can tell you 4 of our facilities along the coast, we have been spending millions of dollars to build back buildings so that the next hurricane can come and tear them down. We this past session, I got $4 million to buy some houseboats, and I'm not talking about just a trailer house on a barge. I'm talking about a houseboat that is all self-contained and that can be moved. It has its own propulsion system, and we're going to locate those. One at Marsh Island, one at Point of Shan, one at Rockefeller, and we're looking at one for White Lake so that we can re-implement that hunting, corporate hunting that we had going on there. Our facilities are really bad. But I think the beauty of that is it gives us the ability, and when a hurricane's coming, we can move those facilities to a safer location. And within a week after the hurricanes come through, we can get them back there and our people can start working again. I've already instructed my folks that I want to spend the money on the habitat. I want to spend the money on the levees at Marsh Island, the structures at Marsh Island to make that a better place for people to be able to go and catch stuff. And that's what my emphasis has been. It's not about buildings anymore. It's nice to have a big, nice, huge camp at Marsh Island, but it does nothing for the structures and does nothing for the habitat in that area. So we're kind of shifting and moving in that direction, Mr. Chairman. But just so y'all know, I've got 4 houseboats. In fact, we bid them out and they came in overbid.
Yeah.
But we're gonna revisit that and look at that and see exactly how we can scale down in some areas. We don't need as big a houseboat in Point of Shan as we do it in Rockefeller. We got a lot of students, a lot of participation from outside groups that come to Rockefeller and visit. And we have to have, because of its remote location, we have to have facilities that can accommodate those people to keep them overnight or keep them there for a week or so. This will give us the flexibility that we need to get that done.
Okay. And I assume when y'all were looking at all that, you looked at quarter boats that could be moved out with a little push boat or something and brought back,
Yes.
as opposed to having to maintain a motorized vehicle.
Well, my background is mechanics and automobiles. So when we looked at these houseboats, the first thing I didn't want was inboard engines, because anytime you're gonna have a problem, you're gonna have to dry dock it. We're gonna fit those facilities with outboard engines that are capable or able to be exchanged with another boat pulling up to it with a slight winch, pull it off and put another engine on. So those are the kind of things we're looking at to make these facilities, how can I say that, more user-friendly and easier to maintain and cheaper to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. It
I'm
just,
sorry.
no, you're good. There are some White Lake projects listing in our existing capital outlay. Some of these projects, there's sort of an update on the right, but like a perfect example is the 750,000 for the White Lake Florence Canal water control structure. That one, we didn't actually use the capital outlay. It was funded with DU and private donors, and the construction is nearly complete. So we did ask for most of us with the White Lake Property Fund over the years, with alligator eggs not having the same value and the corporate hunts not occurring as right, that revenue in that fund is not as strong as it once was. So it's pretty much operating at its annual operations are being covered through the revenue it's generating, but it's not getting enough excess to where you can just spend $3 million on another one. So working with different partners and help from private individuals and organizations is really one of the things that this department does really well and able to accomplish some of our goals because of that. I do want to make a comment, because for the people who are seeing that we've got $26 million in general fund this year, that's all one-time money. We're not using that money for salaries and other things. It was used to create a record retention system for the Office of Wildlife, to try to update our boat and commercial licensing system so it's not being run by the same hamster that's been doing it for a while now. It's to do some new technology for enforcement. It's basically trying to get us, because we've been holding them for a while when we were experiencing deficit spending and not doing a lot of improvements. $4 million of that money's for the houseboats. So we're trying to buy a new mobile command unit because it's all outdated and stuff. So that money is not going to be something that we're relying on. It's stuff to hopefully improve the department and improve our technology to where we can deliver better services to the public and have higher resiliency on those systems as well.
Okay, Commissioner Segar.
Yes. So do you have any timeline on the guillotine gate? I see that it's in the schedule there, but
I will throw that one to Assistant Secretary Myers.
Randy Myers, Assistant Secretary of Wildlife. A question relative to the guillotine structure. So our staff has been working, and obviously the funding situation was, like Brian mentioned, we don't have the full allotment on some of those. But in regards to the guillotine structure, we're actually in the process. A designer has been hired to start designing that structure. The money is there based off of what his estimate is at this time, but we really don't know until you design it and you put it out for bid if we're going to have enough revenue in that capital outlay request to fund that fully. Timing wise, I mean, we're looking at probably another 2 months for the designer to come back. We're in the process of permitting or getting a permit so that he can initiate the soil boring that is required for him to design the appropriate size structure. And the tiebacks and everything, all the other things that are required for those structures to be operable. And then also, once we do that, then we're gonna have some time, probably 6 months to a year, to get the permit from the Corps based on the design that he comes back with. So we're probably looking at least a year out before we can begin any kind of construction on that project.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that a replacement control structure?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
And how long's it been out?
it's been out several years. Yeah,
And we're just now getting around to
because of the-
designing the replacement.
because of the funding. Yes.
Okay, this is where, somebody needs to be involved. It sounds like if something's been broke for several years and we don't have funding, well, everybody needs to be able to try to help to get that funding. I mean,
Well-
typically projects are, and the way normal capital outlay works, you would have gotten the funding just for the design phase first. And you would have designed it, then you would have went from there to how much does it take you to had an anticipation of cost, and they would have been in different capital outlay levels.
Mr. Chairman, oftentimes we waiting on the federal government to give us the funding from FEMA and other hurricane related deals. And I can tell you, when I got here and whenever I was appointed, we were still working on projects from Hurricane Katrina.
We still are.
And the funding, I mean, it's just so slow, it's unreal. Now, we've sped some of that up with the governor's help, with his contacts in Washington, but the process is horrible. I mean, it just drives us nuts because it takes so long to get stuff done after a hurricane comes through and wipes everything out.
When you talk about a white lake, which is duck habitat and all, why aren't we using NACA grants and stuff to help with this?
We certainly take any opportunity we can to apply for those type grants. We work closely with Ducks Unlimited. They have been helpful in a lot of this. In fact, Brian, if you look at the things, a lot of this DU actually helped and worked this to get this done. We're in a process of working with them right now for the pumps that were put into our budget this year through a one-time allocation. So that, we continue to look at any funding opportunity that's out there to
Do I
help
remember right
assist
that
us.
we don't have enough money for the pumps though?
We do now.
We do have, they're
Yeah.
fully funded?
Yes, so we're in the process, again, it hasn't gone out for bid, but based on the information we have gotten back from Ducks Unlimited, is the money that was allocated through this last budget allocation is that we do have enough to buy those pumps.
One of the amendments to our budget was $640,000 in general fund for a pump at White Lake, a pump at Rockefeller, and then some sort of research project.
Waterfowl research project.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, also, this past year, we brought on board a grant, he's a grant specialist to apply for grants and look at the opportunities in all of like the infrastructure bill that was passed. What are our opportunities in there and what grants we can submit? And he will apply for those grants. And I got to tell you, this guy has been really successful. For instance, New York had hired another company to look at the possibility of getting grants. They had come up with about $20 million worth of grants. And then they revisited that and brought him in, and he got way over $100 million in grants for them. So this is the same guy we hired to look at all the possibilities that we have and to make those applications so we can get as much of that money as we possibly can.
Is he local? Is he
Yes,
a
sir.
Louisiana person?
Yes, sir. He's from Baton Rouge.
Maybe we can have him here next month or in Baton Rouge next month for the White Lake presentation. We can kind of plow some of the same ground and see what the various sources of funding are and where we're at on all the projects that are needed for White Lake and what it would take to get it back where it needs to be.
We have got him on contract now for about a couple of months. And I was giving him a little time for him to get his feet on the ground and look at all of that stuff. And as soon as he was going to do that, I was going to have him come and give you an update on where we at, what are the grants we applied for, and what that kind of money looks like. Okay.
Well, I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
suggesting that maybe White Lake would be a good way to approach, to where we would have an idea where we'd all be educated on how the process works and what the possibilities are. Thank you.
Yes, and in part of his, we got together with different staff members. They came up with a list of projects. We submitted that to his firm. They've basically been triaging that with different grant programs and seeing like potential funding sources. And I know that the shoreline stabilization project on the intercoastal waterway was a project that we asked them to look for. And then the levee on the actual White Lake right there at the refuge was a project that we asked him to look at. So I know those are included in his list. I don't know if he's been able to look for, I know that there are a few projects he identified right away that have a timeline that he's working towards. One's a marine debris removal project to expand that program that we're doing for Hurricane Ida. We're seeing if we can get some additional grant dollars to clean up some vessels that are and some debris in the Gulf region that isn't hurricane related. So those additional dollars. So that's coming in April, in August. And then there's another program that it's a September due date. I know he's working towards that one. So I know he's sort of jumped through those at the top because of the timelines on it. But with those, there are White Lake projects in things that we submitted for him to try to secure, whether it's CAP or QIPR or whatever funding it is.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I'm just ready for questions, sir. So anyone
Okay,
else?
that's the end of your presentation.
Yes, sir.
All
Now,
right,
My intent,
questions, comments?
my intent is to come back to y'all in December, once we submitted our budget to the Office of Planning and Budget and our capital outlay request in, and just give this same presentation again and say, here's where we were, here's what we asked for, here's the changes, and then sort of just keep this dialogue going. So it may be a couple times a year, like here's our request and here's what we ended up getting.
Okay, all right, I think that'll be a good approach if we could do that annually, Mr. Secretary, and start that. All right, thank you. All right, appreciate it. Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Try to figure out how to stop this. I hit escape. Joel, you're gonna kill me. I did.
That's okay. Get it back up.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
can I just, I should have taken this opportunity during personal privilege, but I'd like to let the commission know and the public know that yesterday we had an oversight hearing in Baton Rouge. And I can tell you this, it was very successful for a change instead of a lot of confrontation. And I'd like for everybody to know that because of your efforts as chairman and working with some of the past legislators you had contact with, we were very successful in upholding what our NOI was for CWD, and that we worked with them to identify that 25-mile radius. And the good news is that we didn't lose any of that 25-mile radius, which was a good thing, because that's what our plan and our action plan for managing CWD. And that's an important fact, because if the oversight committee would have reduced that, it certainly would have put a kink in our plan. So through your efforts and other members of the commission, we certainly appreciate that. And I want the public to know that we're in a good place when it comes to CWD, and we're going to continue to put all the effort forth and whatever resources we have to address that issue. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Secretary, and you're correct. And I think what I came with was the understanding of the committee members and their support, where we went in thinking that we had a fight on our hands and that there was a chance that they wouldn't support our efforts to mitigate and control CWD. It ended up with a vote of approval and support for our efforts. And so that was as you say, a gratifying takeaway and a compliment to our staff that's done so much work on that, Mr. Myers and his group. And so I think that that to the degree we can, we're gonna control that horrible disease. And again, I guess the most gratifying thing was to have their support and their understanding of what we faced with it. So thank you for that, Mr. Secretary.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Linscomb, alligators and everything else creepy in the night.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing this notice of intent for alligator regulation changes. This notice of intent is basically two parts. The first part is largely housekeeping in nature and related to that license fee restructure that Brian was talking about earlier. So all of these changes that I'm going to go through already have been changed in statute. We're just simply changing them in the alligator regulations to reflect the changes that have already been changed in statute. The last part is an actual change where we're asking for a tag fee or a shipping fee, 1 year reduction from $4 to $3. This is something that we've done before. We actually came to you in, I believe, 2019, and we requested it for 2 years at that time. This time, we're only requesting it for 1 year. Going through the individual changes, the first change that was pulled out in the restructure package was the removal of all severance tax in the department-wide. So this is not an alligator-related thing. We reduced, we took all severance tax out of all charges. The first change in an actual license is not an actual fee change. This is just a change in the way it's stated. And I believe, I should ask you this before, Cole, but I think you actually did this to make it more structure-wise the same as the other licenses as they were stated in regulation. So a hunting license, a resident hunting license is $25 and a non-resident is $150. That's not changing. This is just the way it's stated in the regulations. We're actually, the first actual change is resident fur buyers. That's eventually going to go up to $55. And all these license fee changes are staggered in nature. So for 2 years, they go up an incremental amount. And then in the third year in 2023, in 2024, they actually go up to the final amount. So a resident fur buyer license is $55. A non-resident fur buyer license will go up to $215. Non-game quadruped exhibitor's license will go up from $10 to $20, and a non-game quadruped exhibitor's license will go up from $25 to $50. I should say that what this actually is an alligator farming license. So a non-game quadruped breeder's license covers many, many different animals, primarily fur-bearing animals, but it actually covers alligators as well. So an exhibitor's license would be someone that's not actually growing out alligators for profit. It would just be like a zoo or something of that nature. Alligator parts dealer license is going up $105, and a retailer's license is going up to $7.50. An alligator retailer license is something that's very, very uncommon. Okay, before I move on to the actual hide fee reduction, do you guys have any questions about the rest of these regulation changes?
Questions?
Okay. One other thing I should point out is there's another point where severance tax is struck out in the full-blown notice of intent you guys have. There's many, many different spots where severance tax is removed. I didn't include it in this presentation. So this request for a reduction actually came from the Louisiana Alligator Farmers and Ranchers Association for a reduction in the tag fee. And the original request was actually, I should say, for 2 years. I'll get into a budget projection that Brian McClinton helped us with and explain why we're offering up on the table only 1 year. But before then, I believe, Mr. Chairman, there is a representative from LAFRA.
Yeah, we do have Mr. Steven Segura. Steve, if you want to come up, and welcome back to the commission, sir.
Mr. Chairman, commission members, Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, the only update to this chart is, I believe we provided this to you in February.
Correct.
So on the bottom line, on the left side, the LAFRA Gulf Coast Bank loan, we've got that down to 176,000 now. And to the right, under the loan for the Peach, which is for our lobbying efforts in California, we've got that down to 250,000 now. So, we requested the 2-year reduction as we had before. But at the same time requested that the department checks the health of the fund, and we don't want to cause any detriment to the fund, to the resource fund, right? And so I believe you guys decided that 1 year reduction is something I think the fund could handle.
And I'll
So-
get into that. I'll show the budget
and I believe Mr. Sinceri, Mr. McPherson were on the commission 3 or 4 years ago when I made this presentation. I remember, I don't know if it was one of you guys or not, but somebody asked me, what were the guarantees if we reduce the tag fees by $1, would the industry guarantee that dollar would be redirected to this effort, not go in somebody's pocket? And my answer was, there's no guarantees. This was an honor system deal. And I provided at the meeting in February, evidence that we collected it. It was all collected. It worked as we had hoped it would work. And we're tremendously grateful for the help that you guys allowed.
Yeah, and it's actually up there. If you see LAFRA
Okay, yeah.
tag fee contributions, $587,000. That's the fees that they actually collected on a voluntary basis. So they couldn't force, the major alligator farmers couldn't force any of their other counterparts to contribute. So it was completely voluntary, but obviously it worked. So that question has been answered. And also, going forward with our budget, the issue, there was a question about, well, can our budget actually sustain it? Obviously, this is our budget. Obviously, this is a busy slide. I don't want you to, it's kind of overwhelming, but the bottom line is, if you go back to 2018, you see where we got really high, over $5 million. And that's why they raised the question, can we afford a reduction? And obviously, in the fiscal year 2022, we've sustained that reduction. So things are a little bit different now than when we did this in 2019. It was a much easier task to do a prediction because things were much more stable. We're not in a stable environment anymore. In 2019, we were getting into an overstock issue, not just overstock with alligators in Louisiana, or alligator hides, I should say, in Louisiana. We were getting into an overstock issue with all crocodilian species hides worldwide. That was just the tip of the iceberg. And then coronavirus hit, and then we really got into big problems. And the farmers in the room can speak to this more than I can, but it looked like it was coming around at the early part of this year in January, February. And then the war in the Ukraine hit. And so bottom line, we're just in unstable times right now. We're not shipping as many animals. So it's very difficult for us to predict our revenue, but Brian, as I mentioned, helped with this slide. And this one shows the total number of years he used for the average going all the way back to 2017. But I deleted two of them just so I could blow it up a little bit more so you could see the numbers here. The bottom line is this is a worst case scenario. And I think that's really what you have to do. So the ending fund balance you see there for fiscal year 2023 of roughly $2.5 million obviously is enough money to sustain us for a one-year surplus. And again, knock on wood, I suspect it won't be quite this low. And again, that's the way you should do it, is by using a worst case scenario. So that's really all I have. Any questions?
I don't know if you want to answer this or Mr. Segura.
I'd like to make one other comment. Well,
Certainly, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I failed to mention, aside from I think it was 580,000 collected, farmers and the industry is also matching us another dollar. We're not relying strictly on the $1 tag fee reduction to fund these efforts. It's being matched. So just for your consideration, when you vote on whether or not to approve the other year, that's everybody's pitching in. So
Actually being in the business, what do you think is a long-term feature? Is there a crystal ball you can look into? Is the alligator hides going to go the way of the fur market? Is it just a societal change, or is it a short term and you hope for a rebound at some point?
well, we hope for a rebound, certainly. There's a lot of pressure, sociologically wise, against animal use. But I can tell you that the major brands across the world are really dedicating a lot of resources to fight that. So the folks that are going to drive our rebound are all in on using alligator, crocodile, on using animals, right? So I think it's just a matter of this war getting settled, COVID going away, or at least being managed. And I think the rebound will come. It'll be quite a big turnaround. The major, very, very high-end fashion houses they're blowing and going, they're doing well. It's kind of that middle of the road luxury market, because the world economy is just strained right now. So there's a lot of pent up demand for the products that we produce, but still a lot of instability. But it will come around. Who knows when?
Sound like the true luxury market. Those people don't worry about inflation and budgeting and all, but those people that it's a luxury to them and they would like to have it, but it's discretionary spending on their part.
That's exactly right. And for alligators fur to be successful, we need that kind of upper middle. We need the folks that can't afford it right now. We need them back in the game. The very high end luxury folks, they don't need 300,000 or 400,000 alligator skins a year.
Well, our ad campaign to the bunny huggers, it should be that the reptiles are creepy crawly creatures that eat the poor little bunnies, and therefore we need to make boots and purses out of them.
Well, I think you nailed it there.
Commissioner Segura, this is your opportunity if you want to really pin him down on anything. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you need to take
Oh, I'm
action.
sorry.
Yeah.
You want us to adopt the NOI? All right. Commissioner Hogan, moves that we, adopt the NOI, seconded by.
I'm scared to do something wrong.
Yeah.
One more.
All right. Is there any objection to the adoption of the NOI? Hearing none, the motion is carries. Okay, Mr. Cagle. Shrimp season.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members, and good morning. Today I'm presenting a declaration of emergency for setting the opening for the 2022 fall inshore shrimp season. As requested by Mr. Chairman at the May meeting about showing some recent trend data, I'll put some in here to show you. So we'll start out here from 2012 to 2021. This is all Louisiana shrimp landings combined and value. The landings are in orange, values in blue. What you can really see here is from 2012 through about 2018, we're really stable, above 90 million pounds a year. Dockside value always fluctuate depending on demand. What you really see through 2019, 2020, 2021 is where we start seeing that dip. But if you remember 2019, we had the flooding, we had the 2 Bonnie Carey spillway openings. 2020, we had COVID, we had 3 hurricanes, the 7 that actually threatened us. And then obviously 2021, still dealing with COVID, historical rainfall in the spring, and we had Ida. So we've had a string of bad luck. Now looking at white shrimp only, again, landings are in orange, value blue. You can see white shrimp fluctuates every year. Typically, we're around that 60 to 70 million pounds. Even in 2019, when we did have the 2 Bonnie Carey spillway openings, those were early in the year. You see, we did rebound. So we were over 60 million pounds, but we did dip the past 2 years. A lot of that, again, hurricanes, COVID related. And you can see 2020, that value way down. But that was because there was no demand, restaurants were closed, price dropped. Looking at 2021 by itself, at the top here, you have again values in orange for 2021. Red is your 10-year average. Values at the bottom. What you can really see is COVID hit March 2020. You can start seeing we're below, and we stay below until we get into June. Then we start seeing those landings increase, but we never really exceed our 10-year average for most months, except for like January, June, December. But when you look at the value of the white shrimp in 2021, you can see that, yeah, like for June, as an example, we barely exceeded the 10-year average in landings, but look at the difference of value. So the value of shrimp in 2021 was greater than our 10-year average. And you'll see that in upcoming. So this breaks it down by size, gives you an indication of the size of shrimp by count landed. The gray, that's 2019, the yellow is 2020, and again, orange is 2021. These are landings. The red line is your 10-year average. So in 2021, again, remember we had lower landings overall for white shrimp, and you can see that throughout, but we did exceed the past 2 years and some of our mid-size, the 36, 40, 40, 50, 50, 60. So we did have some positive signs there. When you move into value, again, less landings, but you start looking at areas like the 11-15s, 16-20s, and again, those mid-size 36, 40, 40, 50, that value actually exceeded the 10-year average. This is probably the best indicator here. This shows you price per pound of white shrimp by count size compared to the same time frame. And what you can see is in 2020, overall, the average price per pound was greater than the 10-year average and the previous 2 years. Now, for current data, this data was collected in the week of July 25th through the 29th. Again, just to give you brief oversight of our CSAs, our coastal study areas. CSA 1, that's Pontchartrain, also referred to as Shrimp Management Zone 1. CSA 3, Barataria. 5 is Terrebonne, 6 is Vermilion. Those three combined are referred to as Shrimp Management Zone 2. And then you have your Calcasieu, Mermentau, Sabine Zone 3, Shrimp Management Zone 3. So with these samples, what we're looking for, average size, we're wanting to get at least 50% of that available resource at a marketable size. There is a law for white shrimp that they cannot be over 100 count. So anything bigger in size than 100 count is deemed legal and marketable. So zone 1, that Pontchartrain, you can see we had to split it, and you can clearly see why. These are size frequencies. This shows you the percent by size of the total amount caught. So you can obviously see in zone 1, the open water, 9%, 1620s, 7%, 2125s, very diverse in that group. But when you look at the marsh, you're in the 300s, 400s, 500s. So a lot of really small shrimp that were in that marsh when we sampled. So as we project this data forward by growth, looking at it as to when we meet that 50% at 100 count or better, you can see again, the open water, we're already past it. So the marsh though, with those small shrimp, you see the projection of when the samples were taken, and we make that crossover date right at August 15th. So that's when the marsh crosses over. And again, at the top, the open water, it's already surpassed. Zone 2, and remember that was Barataria, Terrebonne, and Vermilion. We take Vermilion out because Vermilion has a law, it can't open at night. The fishermen in Barataria and Terrebonne always prefer PM opening. So I just put the data separate. So this is zone 2 without Vermilion. Again, you can see here, you're getting 6s, 40, 50, 6%, 51, 60, 6%, 7%, 61, 70. So again, you have some larger shrimp, a good number of mid-sized shrimp, and you still see some really positive signs with additional recruits in that area with the smaller sizes to the back. And again, when you look at zone 2 without Vermilion at the bottom, we've already crossed that 50% at 100 count. So at that, it could open at the earliest available date. Vermilion by itself, again, a lot of mid-sized shrimp here, 40, 50, 50, 60, 60, 70s. It's very common for Vermilion to open on a 40, 50 and end on a 40, 50. So they'll pick up some bigger shrimp as the season goes. Cold fronts move in, bigger shrimp start pushing out. That's when they'll start seeing a lot of bigger shrimp, but very typical is what we see. And again, you notice that high amount of very small shrimp. That was caught at one site. One site was heavy dominant of very small shrimp. It's in a very shallow area, not fished by commercial vessels. So again, projecting the data forward, you can see that the crossover for 50% is on August 5th. Then we get to zone 3, very similar to zone 1. Looking at the data, Calcasieu and Sabine had a lot larger size shrimp. Mermentau River, very small, high numbers. So I split those two out, easy to distinguish between. And when you look at zone 3 without the Mermentau River, obviously you're sitting at that mid-size to smaller size with additional recruits coming into that market size as we project data forward. Again, Mermentau River a little bit behind. As we do progress, you see Calcasieu and Sabine make it over at the end of July. Mermentau River, it crosses that 50% threshold on August 13th. Pretty important, I feel, to show the projected tidal range, especially as it relates to shrimp movement, and that obviously relates to higher landings. we have a tide cycle that begins right around the 6th or 7th. Full moon's on the 11th, followed by the new moon on the 27th. So the department's recommendation for the 2022 fall inshore season would be the Mississippi, Louisiana state line westward to Southwest Pass to open on August 8th at 6 a.m. They like an AM opening, except that area Biloxi Marsh, which you saw the smaller size. That would open on August 15th at 6 a.m. And then from Southwest Pass westward to the Atchafalaya Ship Channel, that would also open August 8th at 6 p.m. And then from the Atchafalaya Ship Channel westward to the Texas-Louisiana state line, that would open on August 8th also at 6 a.m., except the Mermentau River, which would be also be on the 15th at 6 a.m. So it's basically a statewide opening on the 8th. You do have 2 a.m.s with a central PM opening. And then you have those two small areas that would both open on the 15th. And there's a map just to give you a better perspective of what it would look like. And again, those yellow shade differences, that's the AM PM breakdown. So with that, I can take any questions.
Questions, comments? I don't have any cards from the, yes, sir, Mr. Blanchard.
Yes, sir.
Want to tell everyone that the Shrimp Task Force yesterday also
Yes.
recommended your recommendation.
Yeah, so yesterday I went to the Shrimp Task Force, presented this data to them. A very, very good debate and conversation through it. And at the end of it all, the Shrimp Task Force did make a motion to support the department's recommendation, and it passed unanimous.
All right. Well, this is a little bit unique. I think this is the first time since I've been on the commission that we didn't have anyone wishing to speak. It didn't seem to be any controversy. I don't know if you're getting better, Mr. Cagle, or if they're giving up on you. One of the
Should
two.
have listened to the meeting yesterday. I think we're doing well.
I'm glad it happened there.
We had it.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. We go with the department's recommendation and
Okay.
open the season on August the 8th.
Commissioner Blanchard moves that we accept the declaration of emergency for the fall inshore shrimp season opening date as presented. Commissioner Segar seconds that motion. Do I hear any objections to the adoption? Hearing none, it's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Receive and consider a notice of intent establishing closures of certain waters for the derelict crab trap removal program.
All right, good to see y'all again. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Like it says here, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the 2022 derelict crab trap efforts and also the proposed 2023 closure areas. Try to get this one done in 2 minutes or less. So 2022 derelict crab trap results. Here's a map of closures that took place in February of this year. You can see there was 4 of them. We go from Calcasieu to Vermilion, Terrebonne, and Barataria. So closure dates you can see for each one of the closures there. We try to push as many of them in February as early as possible. We try to allow that season to open back up once we start getting into Mardi Gras Lent time. Crab starts selling bigger then, prices go up. So with each closure, you can see the number of traps and the total, just over 700 removed. Program results since we started. These are timeframes. So the first 2 years of the program, then the next bit, and then the last from 2017 through 2022. You can look at the areas and the average traps picked up per year. You can really see since that first 2 years, there were 6 closure areas combined. Total traps removed annual were just over 5,700. Then you can see we dropped down to doing almost 1 closure a year. Since 2017, we've ramped that back up. I mean, we've done 30 closure areas during that time frame, and we're getting almost 4,000 traps a year. So for our 2023 proposed areas, as per statute, What does the statute say the commission can do? Obviously, this commission can designate the area of the trap closures, who can collect these traps, the disposal locations, the date of these trap closures, and the disposition. And within the NOI, we have a clause in there allowing the secretary authority to designate these dispositions, because we have been trying to develop a pilot program to find out a way to get serviceable traps back. We're not there. The industry is not cooperating yet. So we still want to leave it in there in case we come up with a brilliant idea between now and February. Also, the authorized date. Yes, sir.
Let me interrupt you there. Explain that. We're trying to get the traps, once they're picked up, back to the original owner.
We are trying to develop a way to reduce the waste that once it is removed from the water caused by hurricanes, boats, whatever it may be, traps that are serviceable and can return to the fishery rather than going into a waste facility could be returned to the user. And a lot of those programs were a result of the industry participating. Traps that were found in the day could then be returned to those that participated. We've talked about buyback programs. So a lot of different options out there, but yes, it was a way to reduce waste, but also get these traps that were lost due to natural storms or causes or theft back to those fishermen.
How do you distinguish whether they were just abandoned or whether they were displaced by a storm or something?
We'll get to that, but
Okay, you got that in your
well, by
presentation?
rule, any trap that's within the closure is deemed abandoned or lost. So any trap that's within that closure area that we're proposing that this commission authorizes is deemed lost or abandoned and is now property of the state if we collect it.
Okay, and so what is the current disposition of those traps that are picked up?
The current disposition right now is when traps are removed from the water, they're brought back to a disposal site and disposed as waste. So they're smashed, they're put in a dumpster, they're hauled off to a landfill or recycle facility if we can find those. Those are not available across the coast because a lot of people don't want to deal with plastic wrapped wire. So right now, that is the current way we remove and dispose of traps. We would like to reduce that waste. And if there are serviceable traps, allow those to get back to those fishermen. But it hasn't worked out yet.
Okay, I see a little bit of a contradiction in somebody abandons their traps and then you're gonna pick them up for them and then put them in a pile and tell them to come get them.
That is part of, so that has been discussed. Portions of people participating, whether it's a buyback or whether it's pay them for removal of traps, whatever. Why not just leave my traps there? Go pick my traps up. You're going to pay me to pick up my traps. All of that has been considered. Again, it's not perfect, but we're not there. And we don't have the commitment from the industry at this time to do it.
Why would we dispose of them as waste when like you say, they can't be recycled? So why don't we sell them? Why don't we auction them off at public bid?
So that is a concern that was brought up during the pilot program adoption. We talked about getting fishermen to go out there, traps that were found that were yours and proven were yours to take. Traps that were found not yours could then be stripped and then sold at auction. That was an enforcement issue. If you remember discussing that, Chad. And not only that, but the industry had a big problem with it because a lot of these traps are designed based on a person's choice of color or a bait box color that's different or where they put a ring. So identification of their trap, seeing it being used by somebody else would cause user conflict on water. So the idea of selling traps that did not belong to the original user wasn't going to work.
Okay.
Peyton, explain,
Commissioner Blanchard?
who goes and picks up these traps?
For the most part, it is our staff. And we do try to host some volunteer events, whether it's one per area, one per year, depending on what we have financially and staff wise. But most of the time it is our personnel. And then when we have a volunteer day, and we have contracted some people before, which does work well. But again, finding contractors that want to go do this is fairly difficult.
So explain to me how they collect it. Like if you got a trap that's in the middle of Vermilion Bay with no markings, anything, we pass chains in the bay to catch them, or?
No, so that's one, and we can address that too. One of the reasons we do this closure in February and March, as authorized here, that we were going to get to there, is because you have a lot lower tides, you have a lot lower participation, a lot lower harvest rate. So it is the most reduced time in the industry, so we're impacting less people, but really the low tides is helping us. So traps that wash up on the shore, tides are lower, it increases our ability to find them. Traps that are cut and on the bottom in deep water are difficult. We have done some side scan sonar studies before. We've had a contractor that did side scan sonar studies. The results are not there yet to show it efficient. You can identify a trap, but identify and retrieval at the same time are difficult because of interference. A lot of times when you try to grapple it, they're so deteriorated, it just rips off. So, I mean, we try to do that, but the majority of what we have are either considered abandoned or lost because they are in the water with a float, or they're considered derelict and on shore.
It's kind of strange, but when this was first conceived, well, it was too hot of an issue for a coastal legislator to handle, so they went up to central Louisiana and found a senator that was dumb enough to introduce a bill. And
I saw your name on it.
But it's a shame, and I mean, it makes no sense that we're expending time and money and all to do these cleanups. And it looks like that we ought to come up with a way that we can recycle those traps, but not to the person that left them out there, unless they want to buy their traps back at something close to what is taken or whatever the market value is, so be it now. So I'm going to ask that the next time we hear a proposal like this, that we've at least given some discussion and come up with clear answers on how we're not going to continue. Because it was, I remember, it was all volunteers doing this pickup originally, wasn't it?
Yes, it is our staff and volunteers, and then we've moved on. 2016, 17, we had a grant to where we paid the Basin Foundation and BitNet. Since then, 2018 through 2020, we continue to fund Pontchartrain Conservancy to continue to remove traps. So we have some different revenues, but yes, it is from volunteers or contractors plus our staff. But this fund is paid for through license sales. So that's where we get the revenue. The generated revenue is
Which those
from
license sales
sales.
could go back to the conservation fund and be used for something else instead of picking up derelict crab trap. So again, I'm coming back to my point, and you probably don't want me to ask you this morning how much we're expending on this between department personnel and contract, huh?
No, I can. And with the license restructure, obviously, license sales don't go to conservation no more. They go to the crab management fund now, which is broken down for management purposes, just to clarify. Depending on the year that we do, whether we have contractors, whether we do 4 closures, 5 closures, it can fluctuate on the amount, the annual amount, but I would say on a slower year with 4 closures, no contractors, probably somewhere around 60 to 70,000. And then on a year that we go with contractors with the 4 or 5 areas, you're probably looking more 90 to right at 100.
Okay, not a lot of money if you say it fast, but.
And I didn't say 1,000 at the end.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Sincere.
How much money could you get, you think, for 3,000 somewhat crab trap?
Well, considering that a lot of traps are I mean, as you know, from your area being affected by storms and floods, a lot of traps are lost. I mean, a lot of people are good stewards and remove traps, put them on land storage docks, facilities like that to store them, but then they lose them because of a storm. The storm takes them anyway. So we don't want to punish somebody for trying to get traps back that they lost out of control. So when we were proposing this, it was going to be a reduced cost. We had some ideas of cost. We never set it in stone again, mainly because we never got that buy-in from the industry that, yes, we will participate. We like this program. Let's move forward with it and give it a try. But it would be at a reduced rate.
Well, just, because now they're all being thrown away. Maybe, it could be a thing to where you can buy them all and you try to the highest bidder, and they got to do something with dealing with the things, because, you're going to buy them at a discount, and then you don't have to deal with having to destroy them and that additional cost and handling. And I think that some people would probably like to do something like that. That's my thought. I don't know if there's a legal issue. That Patrick?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to try to offer a little bit on this topic. So the closure is proposed for February through March. We have some time to further develop these ideas of how we can reuse these traps that are serviceable. Peyton and the staff have looked at all of these options multiple times. What we can do is put together a list of those potential options of how we can try to reuse these and avoid them going to a landfill, and give you some pros and cons of each of those different options. Maybe not as a presentation, but just as an informational paper to you. And we can get some feedback from you. We can talk about it with the secretary and what we may be able to do. But the great thing is the NOI allows for us to do this if we come up with a good option that the industry can get behind, that we feel like is a good way to move forward. So we do have some time. The NOI allows for us to do this and not just throw them away. But in order to try to maybe give you guys the information y'all are looking for, let us put together an informational paper that shows you the pros and cons of all the different options that we've looked at before.
There's a requirement that the traps have to be tagged, if I'm correct. So are we, when we do this, the tags are missing for most of these traps as they're picked up?
No, a lot of times the traps are very fouled with barnacle algae. So the tag itself, which a lot of times are inserted in the trap on the bait box, you cannot read them. It would take somebody physically cleaning each trap. And during a good year, when we're removing 500 traps in a day, 600 traps in a day, that's just, we can't do it. And we don't have the facility for storage to try to keep them overnight, to clean them at a later point, to identify. We've looked at doing something to that nature as to try to identify the traps, contact the users, but the Wildlife and Fisheries does not have the resource to be able to do that.
Yeah, Commissioner Blanchard.
Peyton, the price of crab traps today, they have to have a group of fishermen. If we had them all in a pile and said, look, y'all put a bid for them, somebody's going to bid for that, because they got parts in them traps that they can redo the traps. Now it's going to take labor to do it, but some of these fishermen, because look, crab traps is, anywhere between $17 and $90 a trap, depending on how you formulate it. So, it's not like a trap is $10 anymore.
Mhm.
And most, fishermen, they hate to lose a trap now because of the price it costs to replace a trap.
Absolutely.
So, I like Patrick's idea that he comes and, brings us, some options, right there, but we definitely need to look at that. And, there's no use for the department to be taking on that expense just to dump them off, right there.
So to touch on both of y'all statements that were just made was, well, we did talk about doing the buyback, giveaway, resale, but it was an enforcement concern with people having other people's traps in possession. And when we brought it to the industry, they frowned upon it too because of concerns of it causing user conflict on the water when traps of a user were being used by another individual. They basically, they would think that they stole their trap. So that was a concern. And then with the taking the traps and selling them in bulk to another area, we have talked with St. Bernard Parish before. We haven't worked it out yet, but we did have some communication with them a couple years ago about possibly being able to have all of the crab traps do a cooperative endeavor, I believe is what Cole said would be the best route to do that back then, to where the traps would basically be sold to them of some sort. And then it would be their responsibility to identify the traps and get them back to the users, whether they're selling them, giving them away, it would be up to them at that point. So we do have that type of idea also flowing through.
Any other questions or comments? I think you see there's a lot of interest of the commission in maybe refining this process and seeing it's on the disposition of the trap. So,
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can say is at this point, we don't have the same interest from the industry.
you don't have what?
The same interest from the industry to adapt this program. And that's where we've been falling short at right now.
Yeah, the industry is the ones though that's abandoning the traps and having the derelict traps and not tending them properly and all. And I understand the hurricane issue and all, but still our responsibility is if we're expending dollars and there's a value to those traps, and we may have to come up with something that the industry can help us work through.
I hope we can.
All right. If I have no cards, do I?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to
Oh,
show you
you
the
done?
proposed areas?
Oh, yeah, if you'd like to, go ahead.
If you want to pass it through, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But anyway, as I mentioned earlier, the available dates that you can authorize these closures, February 1st through March 31st. You can do it for 14 days in conjunction with the opening of spring season. And then anytime that the crab harvest is being closed due to biological or technical reasons, we can also remove traps during that time frame. Now with our first proposed area.
Let me interrupt you.
Yes,
again.
sir.
It says that the disposition will be up to the secretary. Secretary Banks, you said that you'd give us an informational thing. I'm gonna suggest that maybe we bring this back between now and February as a commission agenda item to just discuss, and that way the public can have direct input into that if they so desire.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Okay, that would maybe make sense.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, first proposed closure, Pontchartrain Basin, proposed closure from the 1st to the 14th of 2023. This is an area around Delacroix, following around Grand Lake down to Oak River Bayou, passing through, covering all the way down to Mozambique Point and back up Bayou Terrebuff, if whether you're familiar with the area or not, sorry. Try to lay it out a little bit for you. Again, you're going to see Barataria Basin again, the 1st through the 14th. What we're trying to do here is Mardi Gras comes up right around, I think, a week and a half after this date. So we're getting the closures in. We're allowing people to get their traps back out, have some soak time, start harvest again before these holidays happen. So Barataria, that runs from Port Sulphur down to Empire, and then it goes all the way down to the Shrimp Inside Outside line. We got Terrebonne closure, again, 1st through the 14th. This is an area just south of the Pointe-au-Chien WMA, to give you a reference on that one. And then our last closure, Sabine Lake, you will see the date on that, 17th through the 26th. Texas already has their date set for the closure of the Texas portion of Sabine Lake. So we're going to go in conjunction with them for this closure and recommend we do it the 17th through the 26th. That way the entire lake is closed together. And then a couple of things to remember there, the traps that remain in these closure areas are considered abandoned. LDWF or those designated by this commission can retrieve the traps. Traps can only be removed between half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset. They must be brought to a designated disposal location. And then the traps removed from within the closure area shall be considered abandoned and or property of the department. So such traps shall not be possessed outside of that area unless specifically distributed by the department. So that's language that we're putting in there in case this disposition does work out and we're able to come up with an alternate type of derelict crab trap plan. So any additional questions?
I got one.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Blank.
On your 2022, the really, cleanup results, did you just miss Pontchartrain on purpose or
No.
they don't have any?
We did not do a closure this February or March. If you go back to a historical map, we have had for the past about 4 years, we have had anywhere between 2 to 3 closures in that Pontchartrain basin per year. So again, remember, we were using contractors since 2016. So we've really been putting so many closures in there. One thing we don't want to do is continue to negatively impact the same group of fishermen. That's why you see us moving around these closures, but still trying to make sure we cover the areas to where we can remove those derelict traps.
Cole, a question for you. If we're saying that these become the property of the department, then is there a question of how we can legally dispose of them? Can we give them to anyone at that point?
So there is a question on unconstitutional donations. However, I think the way the NOI is phrased and the mechanisms available to us, like Peyton mentioned, a CEA with a local group, or even a cooperation with the industry, we can find a legal mechanism to accomplish the disposition, assuming we find something that works programmatically.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions, comments? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the notice of intent.
I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Blanchard, seconded by Commissioner Reynolds. Any objection to the adoption of the notice of intent? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, consideration of a declaration of emergency to temporarily reduce recreational daily crew limit on freshwater fish during the scheduled drawdown on spring buying of Oils Parish. Mr. Hill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Commissioners. All right, like you just said, this is something we were asked to do by Oils Parish. I'll go through what Spring Bayou is, what we're looking at, what we're asking. I'll try to do my 2 minutes, Mr. Secretary. Spring Bayou is in the heart of Oils Parish. It's about 2,700 acres, sits in Spring Bayou WMA. It's about 12,500 acres. We're scheduled to draw it down from September 6th through the end of December this year, mostly to combat giant salvinia. It's a little bit closer picture at it. If anybody's not familiar, if you have questions, then I'd be happy to answer those. We are basically just proposing a creel limit cut in half from our state regulations for just the drawdown period. A lot of the parish individuals are worried that the fish stocks would decrease remarkably during the drawdown. So they asked that we propose this for y'all, basically just to save what they think would, diminish their fish populations during the drawdown.
Who are they, Mr. Hill? The police jury? Or
The police jury sent the letter to us requesting a creel change for the drawdown. And we see it as kind of a no harm issue. If we cut the creel in half, the people that are going to fish will still be able to go out and catch fish. During the drawdown, it will be hunting season. So the people will not be allowed to even start fishing until 2 o'clock. And, it's going to get dark 5:30. So that'll limit it in itself. But the police jury thought that a proposed creel limit, would help as well.
And
So
when is the
that's why we're here.
drawdown? I apologize.
I'm sorry?
What's the dates of the drawdown?
September 6th through December 31st. Day after Labor Day through the end of the year.
Okay. Is there any biological rationale to it other than we're
No, sir.
trying to do what people ask us to do?
Yes, sir. It kind of a good faith with the police jury. There is no biological evidence to support cutting a creel during a drawdown.
Yeah. Secretary Reynolds, Commissioner Reynolds.
I asked this question only because at Lake Vista, which is in my area, we have a drawdown every year.
Yes,
And
sir.
a lot of people fish during that time.
They do.
And they catch a lot of fish, but according to what I've heard from the biologists and everything, this does not harm the lake at all. As a matter of fact, since we've been doing the drawdown, the actual fish population has been better than it was before.
Yes, sir. That's one aspect of a drawdown.
So my concern is, if this, people will look at Facebook and say, well, they're doing this at so-and-so lake. Then my concern is up in my area, then people start bombarding us and, say, well, you're killing Lake Vista now, so I'm kind of hesitant to set a precedent that people could fall in behind.
I understand.
That's just me,
I completely understand it.
Okay.
We're here on behest of Bowles Parish Police Jury. We've had several conversations with multiple members to let them know our thoughts, biologically speaking. But in good faith, I'm here today to ask for the career change.
And how many lakes do we have drawdowns on right now?
Whew.
A bunch, right?
Statewide,
Yeah.
I'm working on just two in just my district, which is basically from Marksville to the coast between the Mermentau and the Atchafalaya Basin. So I'm working on two. I would assume Black Saline's going to come down. Bissell is on its way down. Henderson,
Yeah.
they open the gates on August 1st. We do drawdowns regularly every year.
Well, I'm concerned that we set this precedent and then we open up a can of worms for future things. That's just mine. That's
Yes,
my
sir.
opinion.
I understand.
Mr. Banks, I'm getting ready to chime in, because this is management by fiat instead of management by biology or science. And at some point, we've got to try to educate the public, because if we pass these things, they think that's good science, that's the management, as opposed to trying to educate the public and use these. We're getting ready to go to a meeting in August, and the public's gonna be asking us to do something that the science may be opposed to that. So at what point do we go back, and when we get a request like this, we ask to address the police jury and have somebody there, and they can put it on their meeting and say, maybe we can ask the commission to do this, but there's really no basis that we can tell them that it's good science to do it. It may be contrary to the science.
Well, you make an excellent point. So did Commissioner Reynolds. This does concern me from a where will it end? How many other lakes will ask us for that? As I appreciate it from Daniel and his staff, they advised the police jury that there is no biological reason that this would be needed. One of the things that Daniel and his staff felt strongly about was that a drawdown is needed. And so one of the things that the police jury said to us was, okay, we will be okay with a drawdown if you take some considerations like this. And so that was sort of what moved us over the line here to bring their request to you all. But we fully advised them, I don't think it was from a public meeting, maybe it was, that there wasn't no biological need for this. But what Mr. Reynolds says is you're right. We feel like there may not be no end to it moving forward. But again, we would not propose this for Bistineau on our own. We would not propose this for Spring Bayou on our own. This was requested of us. It was, as Daniel said, a good faith effort with the police jury so that they would help us get the lake drawn down this year.
And this is projected for September.
Yes, sir.
So this is our only meeting to have the opportunity to do that. So whatever the disposition of the commission is on this issue, but I'm going to sure urge that in the future, when we get one of these requests, y'all go back to the whatever public body that was, whether it's a Lake and Game Commission or whether it was that, and they've got to be timely in their request, or you can tell them that it's probably going to be turned down or could be turned down by the commission because the science doesn't really support what you're requesting. But we did away with the Lake and Game Commissions because of problems that you had haphazard, no biological basis for what they wanted to do other than just anecdotal stuff. And if we're going to let the police juries that kind of replace the Lake and Game Commissions do the same, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Ms. Secretary, you'd like to give us a political take on it?
I think you're opening a can of worms. I really do. You know, the thing that I preach to the governor all the time is if we follow the science, we stay out of trouble. This is a typical example. When do you tell the politics? No, that's not part of the science. And what we're going to do here is open a can of worms to about another 200 lakes or whatever that has drawdown. So we're going to have all of this smorgasbord of we're going to reduce creoles here. We're not going to reduce here. And I would caution the commission to open that door because there is no science that supports it.
Before I call on Commissioner Sinceri, maybe we ought to bring this back up at our September meeting and have had a meeting with the police jury. There's a real fine gentleman by the name of Kirby Roy, that's president of the jury down there. I'll call him, talk to him personally, and just see how adamant they are and how much pressure they're getting to do this.
I think that's a good move.
Commissioner Sinceri.
We're gonna draw down no matter what, right?
It's been approved. Everything's been
And we don't
approved.
have to do a creel limit at this time if we don't want to, right?
We do not. The creel limit will not kick in till the start date of the drawdown.
So I have to agree with the chairman that this would be an opportunity to try to discuss this, let them know what the concerns are of the commission and the department and what kind of a lasting effect that something like this could have on other resources around the state that you know, we have concerns about doing it. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is that we revisit this and take no action on it at this time with the knowledge that you're gonna speak with the police jury.
Mr. Chairman, following your call to that guy, I would like to instruct the staff to, at the next police jury meeting, to go up there and educate them on what the sign says. Okay, again, reemphasize and also tell them, you don't have to lay out what the possible ramifications of this are, but that inform them that this is going to create massive problems for all the other lakes that we manage in the state. And then I think we can go from there.
I would just ask, Mr. Hill, is it, I mean, when you have a drawdown, you got a slow fall, and typically a slow fall is good for fishing. That helps turn the
Yes, sir.
fish on.
That's why.
Makes them bite better.
Yes, sir. That's why you
But
see it.
But this is a kind of eutrophic lake system that has a great ability to replenish itself from a fish standpoint. You need to get rid of the salvinia because it shades out the beneficial aquatic vegetation and stuff. But I mean, there's no negative impact to continuing the limit at the same thing. I mean, there's going to be plenty of fish and may even have more room for the fish to grow. I would assume. Am I making some correct assumptions?
The grocery store will be wide open when you draw down because there's less water. So the predatory fish, they have a blast. They enjoy themselves.
But does it have an effect on the recreational species from a positive or a negative standpoint? How would you ask that question if you were before that?
I would say that drawdowns, they basically restart the clock on the environment. That all of the habitat that fish spawn in is given time to harden. So your nesting success goes
I
up.
understand that, drawdowns are good, fluctuations are good on the lake from a fishery standpoint. But from reducing the limit to where you're taking less fish than you could be taking, you're taking potentially half the fish if everybody caught their limit every time they went, I guess.
It would be better to remove more fish. Let them fish it,
That's what I was looking for. So the drawdown is actually contrary to the science. So that's what you're gonna explain to them.
Yes, sir. I mean, that's why.
By the way, I'm not gonna be there.
That's why you see people at Bisno when it's on a drawdown,
Yeah.
they come in the droves to catch crappie.
Yeah.
That's
From all over the world.
exactly, yes, sir.
Assistant Secretary Banks and then Commissioner DeQueer.
Well, I just want to clarify something. The drawdown is good for fishing. I think what you meant to say was allowing less fish to be taken is not good for the
I
fish.
think that's the way he answered, wasn't it?
Well, I think, but I heard you say the drawdown is not good for the fisheries.
No, I was saying that the drawdown is good. The fish are
Right.
gonna start biting
Absolutely.
better on the slow fall. I thought is what I said.
And one other quick thing, I just want to make sure Daniel and his staff had these discussions with the police juries. So maybe not, I don't, it wasn't at an actual police jury meeting, if I recall.
It was,
But they had these discussions with the police jury. So having them again, I think is very, very helpful. But just know that we didn't just take their letter and just come to you all. I mean, Daniel had these extensive discussions with them about the concerns that we had and that it just really wasn't necessary. So.
Suggestion. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps you could use Lake Vistino as a model.
I-
There's lots of data.
I actually
Because-
do.
We, we've been having drawdowns there for years and years and years, since before I was in the legislature. I remember those days. So that would be, you could actually put the facts right in front of their face,
I haven't used any of the data for Bistineau, but the experience I've had up at Bistineau when it comes to giant Sylvania control and just watching the people come out in
Right.
droves when we do pull the plug and draw it down.
Mhm.
And then the crappie that they're taking out of there, it's
Yeah.
impressive.
It's impressive, yes.
Okay, Commissioner DeQueer.
Mine is real simple. I'm assuming this May 11th letter is part of our meeting records and what we're gonna. Because they only ask us to do it if it's necessary in their letter. So if this isn't necessary.
I got one question too. The police jury, if they concerned about, changing the creel limit and the science is not there, why don't they just do a good faith with the people there? Just look, if you go and fish and take it in good faith, we in the drawdown, we know we're gonna catch fish. Take what you think and leave the rest in there,
The short answer to that is it's a Boyles Parish we're talking about.
I've never been.
That is exactly how they answered it. When we brought that up, that's exactly how they answered it. They're worried about people getting in there and getting theirs. That's what we do.
Shit, I've never been there, so.
Okay.
It's a very good fishery. If you like to catch bass or
Commissioner
crappie.
Reynolds, would you like to move that we delay this for a month?
I would make the motion, we delay this till the next meeting, till September meeting, to maybe do a little data processing for the people up there at Spring Lake.
Okay, and Commissioner Sunseri seconds that motion. Is there any objection to the motion to delay for 1 month? Okay, then that motion is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Receive and consider a notice of intent to modify regulations regarding swordfish and round scale spearfish. Mr. Adrian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so glad Marine Fisheries doesn't have those politically contentious issues. All right.
This month.
Swordfish, this is a notice of intent to modify our billfish regulations. It's mostly concerned with swordfish. Our regulations were a little outdated compared to the newer federal regulations, and so we wanted to fix that inconsistency. So that we don't get any anglers penalized when they're transiting with those swordfish from federal waters into state waters. And some of these newer regulations are based on newer data on swordfish, and then some newer marlin data where they actually, there's a very similar species to white marlin that's called round scale spearfish. And it's now a separate species. And so it would be added to these regulations as well. But with swordfish, some of the change in the federal regulations came about from some new analysis of weights. The old rule was a dressed carcass weight or a carcass length. And that carcass weight rule was highly variable, and with depredation issues too, you could have a very nice swordfish that had a chunk removed. And when you take the head off and you just have the carcass, it's less than 33 pounds, so you couldn't keep it. You'd have to waste it. And some of the new rules avoid that. And the newer federal possession limits, they actually distinguish between private, charter, and head boats. So the new measurements that you'll see in the NOI are a lower jaw fork length, which is the top measurement you see there from the lower jaw out to the fork of the tail, or the clythrum to caudal keel length. And the clythrum is basically the back of that gill plate. And so when you cut the head off, you have that curved area that used to be where the gills were, back to the front of that caudal keel, which is that little raised portion on the fish before the tail. And so here are those proposed changes. We would add round scale spearfish to the billfish regulations, and that's at that same 66-inch lower jaw fork length than the other. That's similar to the other marlins. And our current regulations would change from that 29-inch carcass length I mentioned, which was very similar to the clythrum to caudal keel measurement, except it's been reduced now. And that dressed weight 33 pounds is removed from the regulation. It would add this new 25-inch clythrum to caudal keel for swordfish, or a 47-inch lower jaw to fork. And then the possession limits would change for each of those. The private charter boat and head boat, they're all one per person, but the vessel limits are different. For a private vessel, it would be 4 per vessel, charter boat 6 per vessel, and a head boat, which occasionally we do have one or two of those running around, it would be 15 per vessel, whichever is lower. I'll take any questions.
Yeah, it's just, all we did here was mirror our federal regulations, so we didn't have any issues. So that works good. I
Correct.
appreciate you taking care of that.
Thank you. Any more questions? From the commission, we have. I'm sorry. Have a motion to, a motion by Bill, by Commissioner Hogan, a second by Commissioner Segura. At hearing any objection, hearing none, motion carries to move this notice forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is to receive and consider notice of intent to modify the regulations regarding the closed season harvest of sharks.
Thank you. So what we have here is a notice of intent to modify our closed season for sharks. And just to remind you, that is an April through June closure for all possession of sharks, both recreational and commercial. This was a rule put in place back in the early 90s. Shark populations weren't doing as well. The idea was to protect pupping sharks. There used to be a bigger fishery in the Atchafalaya area, for example, where pupping bulls move into not a lot, but there are certainly several shark species that are rebuilding, and we're encountering them more. And we've had issues also fully utilizing the commercial quota in recent years. That commercial season begins in January. It's typically a Lenten market when that shark meat really moves. The closure would hit in April, and that fishery would essentially shut down, whether that quota was met or not, because those folks, they fish in multiple fisheries, they'd move on to shrimping or other things. So by doing this, it would allow us potentially to utilize that quota. It's a federally set quota, but it would allow us to utilize it more. And it would allow recreational anglers to also keep sharks if they wished in April, or fish for sharks in April, and not have to worry about the possession. So we looked at different things. You could change recreational bag and size limits in state waters for some species, but then you end up with some of these inconsistencies with federal regulations. And there might be some pushback. This closed season, no other states along the Gulf have it. There is no closed season in federal waters. So this is one that biologically doesn't give us an issue. The federal regulators don't have really much of an issue with us modifying this. And federally permitted commercial shark fishermen, they can actually keep sharks during our closure when they're harvesting them in the EEZ. So they can still bring those fish in. So this would be a little more fair to our state shark anglers as well. Quotas, we can't really adjust those as are set by the federal government. So this is one way to provide that opportunity. We did go to the Finfish Task Force and recommend removing the entire closed season, the entire April through June. They chose to endorse just the removal of April. And so that's why we brought this notice of intent as just removing April. However, as I mentioned, there really is no issue if you remove the entire closed season. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions, comments? Yeah, I would enter. Yes, sir.
Richard want to speak on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Richard, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jason. Richard Fisher, just down the street in Metairie. Nice to finally play a home game for once. We are in support of opening up shark season in April. We would also be in support of opening up shark season year round. As Jason alluded to, the shark populations have rebuilt since the 90s. And if any of y'all go offshore fishing, some of y'all might do a little bit of that this weekend. It's a problem, and it's going to be a problem this weekend. It's been a problem, and it's continued to be a problem where you just can't get a fish up to the boat without just getting ahead. So anything we can do to harvest more sharks, we are in favor of. And if it would be the will of this commission to go year round instead of just adding one more month, that would be something that I think you'd have some big fans of down on the coast. Thank you all very much.
Commissioner Segura.
I'd make a motion that we follow the rest of the states and just open it year round.
And there's no problem with that, Jason,
No
what you
problem.
just said?
No, originally my recommendation of the Finfish Task Force was to remove the closed season entirely.
Okay, so the motion and the second by Commissioner Sinceri would be to open the season up on an annual basis with no closed months. Got that, Mr. Garrett? All right, is there any objection to that amendment? Hearing no objection, the NOI is amended. Do I hear a motion to adopt the NOI as amended? Mr. Blanchard, seconded by Commissioner Reynolds. Any objection to the adoption of the NOI as amended? Hearing none, the NOI is adopted.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Banks.
I just want to make one statement. We often hear in both the commercial and the recreational community that once a regulation goes in place, it'll be there forever. These regulations, these closed seasons were put in place a while ago to help rebuild the stock. You all have done a very good thing today and proved to the public that you are willing to remove a regulation when it's no longer necessary. So I appreciate that.
So is your request for purposes of consistency that we revisit and
Only if we see a biological need to revisit it, will we bring it back to you. So
okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, thank you for your input as always. Very valuable, and we do appreciate it. Okay, any other public comment? Anyone would like to be heard today? All right. At this time, I'd like to get a motion to go into executive session. Commissioner Sinceri makes that motion, seconded by Commissioner Hogan. Do we need a roll call on that?
It requires 2/3 vote.
Okay, Ms. Susan?
Bill Hogan,
Yes.
Dean Reynolds,
Yes.
Andrew Blanchard,
Yes.
Allison Jerry,
Yes.
Kevin Cabrera,
Yes.
Brandon Duclair,
Yes.
6 votes in favor.
Okay, at this time, we will ask the public and those folks that aren't part of this discussion, if we could have the room. Thank you, Pete.
It don't be a.
So, I'm working the room.